Well, we are back at it here on Upper Left Sports, taking a little bit of a break as we did have I had a major life change, bringing my first son into the world. Declan, welcome.
Congrats, man.
He is a Zags fan, don't worry. We've got his March outfit is already picked out. So
actually experienced a Zag win the day he was born.
That's right.
Yeah. He's a good luck charm.
So anyway, we're getting back into it, and the Zags are coming off of a tough loss in Moraga at St. Mary's. 67-52 was the final score, and really what we saw in that St. Mary's game is it was the first Zags loss since December. You kind of forget things were going good. We were at the last Zags loss in Seattle versus Alabama. That felt like a long time ago, and WCC play, not to take anything away from the great year the WCC's having, but WCC play may have hidden some of the issues that we knew this Gonzaga team had. Randy Bennett's squad, second time seeing the Zags this season, definitely executed on their game plan, handed the Zags their third loss of the year. But really what we're going to talk about today is, has this Gonzaga team been exposed? Have we seen the blueprint, laid out by Duke, Alabama, St. Mary's on how you beat this team? And one thing I want to start with before we dive into it is I think it's very important that we set expectations. This team is not the team that lost to Baylor in the national championship last year. They're not the team that had an early exit loss to Texas Tech a few years ago. So we need to gauge this in two ways. A, what is success for this Gonzaga team? And yes, getting a number one overall seed, which is still on the table, is a great success. Making another Sweet 16 is a great success. Obviously, with Gonzaga now, Final Four is kind of the bar. And I think that a lot of Gonzaga fans out there, all they really care about, it may not be fair to the kids on this team, is how does this Gonzaga team get over the hump and finally win that, elusive national championship? And we're going to dive into some of the issues we're seeing and in some different ways that we think this team can turn it around.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, like you said right away, you got to be fair to the kids on the floor, because as fans, we've grown accustomed to Final Fours and kind of being that team.
Yep.
And we just go into the tourney. And you just got to remember, March is March, man. It's called March Madness for a reason. Every year you start from scratch once that tournament starts, and you got to go on that run. So we have seen some common themes arise, though, in these three losses. And I think St. Mary's in particular, you look at their loss, and I don't know that it's super surprising. You and I talked right before we started filming this here. In that first St. Mary's game, St. Mary's really did a good job in the second half. They were down pretty big, and they clawed back and made that an 8-point game, if I remember correctly. Had a lot of momentum before the Zags were able to kind of put that game away.
Sure.
But when you give a team like that, when you let them see that their plan works, even if it's only for 6 minutes in the first game, they came out and they executed that plan for a full 40 minutes, and we see what happens. But we're going to get into these particular issues because there are recurring themes, as you said, and it really brings some things into question, and definitely some issues that Gonzaga will have to handle and prevent from happening again.
I rewatched the St. Mary's game this morning, and really two things stood out to me in terms of how do you beat this Gonzaga team. And really the first thing that you do control as an opponent is your mindset. And I think with St. Mary's, they've obviously have a leg up because they know Gonzaga. They're not afraid of Gonzaga. They know the style of play that they play. So Randy Bennett could wake up in the middle of the night. He has a game plan on how do we play Gonzaga. We saw that last year with Baylor, because a lot of people forget Gonzaga and Baylor were scheduled the morning of the game to play in Indianapolis earlier in the season. So Scott Drew and his team, they'd already put in the work. They had a game plan for Gonzaga when they played them in the national championship on, a day's, break between the Final Four. They were able to go back into their initial game plan, pull up some new film, and kind of execute on that initial game plan. And we obviously saw it work. So it's really hard when you get to the tournament. Teams that haven't played Gonzaga, haven't played that style of play, which this year you're going to see from Gonzaga and Arizona in terms of that tempo. It's very difficult to prepare for if you haven't seen it before. But let's talk about tempo for a second. And it was something that we know Mark Few, he wants to play at a fast pace. It's really difficult to do that if you're not making your shots. And we really saw in all three of the losses this season, the opponent be able to dictate the tempo with St. Mary's when you truly do have a massive gap in talent on the floor. It becomes very important. And so mindset's one thing, execution is another. And we saw St. Mary's execute on both of those. Talk to me a little bit about tempo and why it's so important that if this team's going to win a national championship, that they dictate the tempo in every game, really moving forward.
Yeah, it's an absolute must. You look at Gonzaga's transition scoring stats, they are the most lethal transition team in the country. I'll step out and say that. When you look at the quantity of transition looks they get, as well as the efficiency, there are a lot of teams out there who get a lot of transition looks. There are not teams who finish those looks at the clip that Gonzaga does. And that's what makes this team so scary. And like you said, you got to make your shots. But I think on the other end, too, you have to force misses, right? To get out in transition, you either are forcing misses and pushing the ball off the rebound, or you're forcing turnovers.
But that's the thing. So pause real quick is when you're not hitting your shots, which will happen, how do you then control the tempo? And it's just that.
It's the defensive end.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's, you look at St. Mary's. St. Mary's shot over 50% from the field in this game. Gonzaga on the season has held their opponents to, I want to say, if I remember correctly, it's about 37% from the field. So that right there is a huge change in the efficiency that you're giving up to the other team. And St. Mary's in particular, I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. St. Mary's has the same game plan year after year after year because Gonzaga has the same game plan. Gonzaga wants to push the ball. St. Mary's has grown accustomed to this. They've been one of the better teams that the Zags have seen every year in terms of muddying up the game and just
they know they're not going to have the talent.
It. No, they know that if they win, it has to be a low-scoring game. They know that. They accept that, and they're okay with it. And they've just done a good job of executing it on that. You look at Alabama. While Alabama didn't necessarily muddy up the game, they ran the pace that they wanted to. And that was big right away. They ran the pace they wanted to. They got the shots they wanted to. So they really dictated that tempo, even though that was a little bit more high-scoring game. And so these are just recurring issues for Gonzaga. Gonzaga has to play fast. If they want to play fast, obviously it helps when you're shooting your standard, 55% from the field. You have your bigs shooting their standard percentages, but you have to play defensively. When it comes down to March Madness, we know this. Defense wins in March. If you want to question that, go look at the Baylor game. Defense wins in March. Defense is what starts everything. It will be the number one focus for this team going forward is they have to dictate the tempo. It's not a question. It's a must.
A lot of people are going to watch, if you do give Gonzaga any credit, you're going to watch this St. Mary's game and say, oh gosh, that's a team who could make a run. And we see this a lot when Randy Bennett gets a team ranked in the top 25, one of these years where they beat Gonzaga. They're going to be that darling pick that a lot of people are going to make in their brackets. And I'll tell you, slow your roll a little bit. We're going to do, a bracketology show and all that. Is they are structured to beat Gonzaga. If they play Gonzaga 10 times, they are structured to beat Gonzaga a few times out of those 10 times. Mm-hmm. They are not structured to go deep into the tournament. I mean, they're most likely, if you look at Joe Lunardi's bracketology right now, they're, projected to be I think it's a 4 seed playing a 11 seed in Michigan.
6 seed right now.
6 seed playing an 11 seed in Michigan.
Yeah.
I think they dropped that game to Michigan. I think Michigan's a more talented team. I don't think that St. Mary's is a team that's built to win in the NCAA tournament, but they are built to beat Gonzaga. Now, we talk about, if you're missing your shots, what do you do? Well, let's talk a little bit about what we saw, and this is a big point of what this team needs to get figured out. We've talked time and time again on this show about how important it is for both of the Gonzaga bigs to really establish, dominance inside. Drew Timme, the last time he played St. Mary's, scored 25 points. He did not score in the first half in Saturday's loss down in Moraga. And so we know, we've said it all season long that if you're able to keep Drew Timme off the low block, make him catch the ball, 7 to 10 feet away from the basket, you will create issues. That's definitely what St. Mary's did on Saturday, and it worked. But, we also saw the same thing kind of with Chet Holmgren, where St. Mary's really did not want him to get easy looks. Mark Few, the evolution of Mark Few in this program really has been, we are going to be the most efficient team in college basketball. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? You get good looks. You get out in transition. You get easy buckets, whether it be in transition or, a lot of that cutting action that we've seen Gonzaga get into. What's tough is when things aren't going your way and you're not playing at the tempo you want to play. As a player, you tend to rush things. You tend to speed up a little bit, and we saw a lot of that. We saw Andrew Nembhard take several looks that were just not in the offense early in the shot clock. We saw Chet Holmgren do the same thing. I think it all starts with, there's a point we're going to make here in a minute about where Chet Holmgren needs to be in the NCAA tournament, but I think it starts with this team kind of laying their foundation that Drew Timme does need to just find a way, whether it be through grit or whatever it may be, to establish low post dominance. That doesn't mean he needs to score 25 points.
No.
It means he needs to get the position, because if this offense does not have the ability to work the ball inside, get it out to shooters, create spacing, this is not a team that's going to go score 80 points a game. They're going to score 60 points like we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, if you push everyone off the block, I mean, everything becomes a whole lot harder. Cutting lanes are no longer there. It becomes very difficult. And as you said, I mean, we've seen in all of the losses, the teams have done their work against Drew Timme before he catches the ball. And that's exactly what we saw happen. And, you know, St. Mary's finally did a good job of that. They really pushed him off the block. And with St. Mary's game plan, that works exceptionally well, because they choose, rather than to bring help from the weak side, St. Mary's defense chooses to double with their wing guard on the big. And so when you already bring the big that far out, now that double is not traveling very far. So he's able to guard both Timme on the double and get back out to guard his opponent on the three.
They also had a lot of success in that game of not even bringing help. I mean, if you can not bring help and just have your guy not allow him to get deep, changes everything. We've seen teams try to double in Gonzaga, Rozier Bolton, Nembhard, make people pay for it. They had a lot of success not even bringing help.
No, and they really did. There's still multiple possessions where, you see that guard take at least a step or two and just let Timme know they're there, but they're not committing to a double. And again, it's just when Timmy's that far out, they don't have to, because they're right there. They can play both. But this team, Timme shoots 62% at the rim. Chet shoots 72% at the rim. I think both of them missed some shots in that St. Mary's game that they normally do make. Even though I think St. Mary's did a good job down low, I think it was just a little bit of these guys missed some shots that they normally make. And that's what happens a little bit when you get punched in the mouth. You go down 8-0 to start the game.
You speed up a little bit.
You feel right away that St. Mary's is dictating the tempo, and all of a sudden you're 10 minutes in, you're like, okay, St. Mary's has control of this tempo. It really puts pressure on you to now just make shots, and you start losing sight of your offense, and you just look to be a shot maker rather than just calm down and play your offense. And that's really where this team is the most efficient 2-point scoring team in the country in Gonzaga. They have to play to that. We talked at the early beginning of the season. We were worried about this team's ability to shoot.
Everyone was.
And I think, as the team started to dominate down low, they started getting quality looks outside. And these guys are capable, very good basketball players that obviously have taken advantage of those throughout the season. And now they're a good 3-point shooting team. But it all starts with down low. If you can't dominate that, if you can't dominate that position before you get the ball, everything else is out the window. You're now put on your heels.
I mean, one of the notes we have in here is that Gonzaga is going to need to shoot over 35% from three in the tournament. They're shooting 38% on the season. That's 22nd in the country. But it all comes from within the offense. I promise you, when they broke down the film as a team this week, one of the things that I promise you was mentioned was there was a lot of hero ball being played. There was a lot of, like you mentioned, they get down 15 points, and we got out of the offense, A bad look is different than a look that's not in the offense. It's not, within the system. And we saw a lot of that. And so if they're going to shoot well from three, they're going to need to play within themselves. We saw a lot of like Andrew Nembhard getting to that mid-range shot late in the second half. And we're like, that's your game right there. Stick to that. That will open up open 3-pointers later in the game. I do want to make the point that we started to get into there. And that's talking about, for this team to win a national championship, I believe that Chet Holmgren, who wants to be the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft, needs to be the best player in the NCAA tournament. You see guys like a Ja Morant, who they knew, like, oh, we can you can take this Murray State team, somewhere in the NCAA tournament. He could be the most talented, but he's not on the number one team in the country. Well, if only we had a freshman who had done that and cut down the nets. Oh, wait, we did. His name's Carmelo Anthony. Hopefully you're old enough to remember when Syracuse went on that magical run.
Yeah.
But he was the best player in the tournament. And if you go back and look at the stats, when the games got bigger, I think he scored 33 points in that Final Four matchup versus Texas, had like 13 rebounds, something like that. But when the games got bigger, Carmelo Anthony got bigger. He stepped up. And so for me, it's a very fine line, because if we get tournament Drew Timme all the way up until Baylor last year, where Drew Timme was just eating, Chet Holmgren's going to be an afterthought. I mean, it's just, you cannot have both. I mean, we've had games where Timme scores 25 and Holmgren scores 18. That's fine. But I really believe it's finding that balance between how does Drew Timme establish himself, because if Drew Timme's not scoring down low, he's limited on both ends of the floor. He's not a plus defender. He can't really do much on the offensive end other than scoring down low, so he needs to get his. But I truly do believe that Chet Holmgren needs to be the best player on his team, the best player in the NCAA tournament, and really go on a Carmelo Anthony run if this team's going to cut down the nets.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Chet is 100% fully capable of that, both skill-wise and just in terms of the mentality he possesses. We've talked about his fire, and he was one of those guys that he wants the smoke. So I truly do believe that as the lights get bigger, he's going to get bigger.
And you know who's told him to do that? Drew Timme.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, but you bring up an interesting point where it's like you can't have both. And I think what you're going to see in the first two matchups, let's say that Gonzaga gets their 1 seed. I think what you see against the 16 and the 8 seed is I think you see Timme beat Timme, because against those teams, they're unlikely to have a defensive big that can cause issues. They're unlikely to be able to push him off the block before he gets the ball. You're going to just take the easy route to the win, which is probably Timme just doing his thing down low. Now, as you start getting into the Sweet 16 and deeper, these teams become real, and these problems you're going to face become real. And that is where, like you said, Chet needs to step up, because he has the potential. I don't care who it is, against any team in the country, he has the potential to be the best player on the floor. We've seen multiple games this year where he affects the game in 5 or 6 different categories. When a guy's putting up 24, 17, 4 blocks, 4 steals, and 3 assists, I mean, that is a full stat sheet, and that's just, you can't really guard that, because you take away his scoring, he can find an assist, but what he does defensively changes everything. And it loops back to our tempo point, right? Because we talk about how defense turns into offense. Gonzaga capitalizes on that. Chet is the best defensive player in the country, in my opinion. Whether he gets one of his 4 blocks a game, or whether he's altering one of the 6 to 8 shots a game that he does, he changes everything for opponents near the rim. So it is key for him to step up and take over on both ends of the court to really see the best Gonzaga team you can see. And if he is that player, I mean, things change a lot for the Zags. It's very, very difficult to beat them.
You hear a lot of times where, well, the offense has got to go through so-and-so. Well, the thing with the offense going through Drew Timme, again, you can establish low post position and not get a touch. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the offense kind of starts and ends with Drew Timme, because you don't see a ton of balls go inside that come back out when Drew Timme gets a touch. I believe that the offense needs to run through Chet Holmgren. He needs to get a touch most times through the, down on the offensive end. When you say that Drew Timme's the best defensive player in the country.
Chet Holmgren.
I'm sorry. Please. Chet Holmgren is the best defensive player in the country. That's kind of like a water is wet statement to me, because
sure.
The only reason that you don't believe that is you haven't watched enough Chet Holmgren.
You see his frame, you make decisions.
I mean, Chet Holmgren, even though he didn't have a massive night on the stat line, I believe he's the only reason Gonzaga had a swinging chance at the end of that game. I mean, he changed so much on the defensive end versus St. Mary's, where, you look at even just, he didn't block a ton of shots, but just changing shots. We saw Kuzi several times, like, I'm probably good here. And we've said off air, and I'll say it, that if you take Chet Holmgren off of this team, I think that Gonzaga is a 3, maybe 4 seed. I mean, that's how big of a deal he is to this team.
Mm-hmm.
looking at bracketology right now, we'll do a full bracketology show and we'll give our predictions and all of that. But there's a very interesting thing to look at right now, and it's that if you look at Joe Lunardi's bracketology, where Gonzaga is that number 1 overall seed, which they're going to have to win in Vegas to get the number 1 overall seed.
Have to win out.
If they don't, you're praying that they get, maybe the last 1 seed and they're sent to the Midwest or something like that, which right now it's where Arizona's going. But here's what's interesting is if Gonzaga gets through the first round, gets through the second round, which second round matchup right now is Creighton and Iowa State. Andrew Nemhard's brother, Ryan Nemhard's out for the season, so Creighton doesn't scare you a lot right now.
Yep.
But here's what becomes interesting. The Sweet 16 matchup right now on Joe Lunardi's bracketology would set up the Zags versus the winner of UCLA and Alabama. And so you look at, issues this team could have. I mean, there could be some major challenges earlier in the tournament than maybe fans are expecting. And so we're going to do a whole conversation next week on teams that Gonzaga may want to avoid when the bracket does come out. Like I said, when it comes out, we'll do a full bracketology as well. We do want to, I know there's been a lot of negative and a lot of constructive criticism in this conversation. There's a bright point and a little bit of breaking news that we do want to share with this Gonzaga basketball program, and that's that they very likely could be getting some reinforcements on the way, and that is Dom Harris. He has had a foot injury all season long. He was supposed to be a major part of this Gonzaga, team this year. We heard that he was the best 3-point shooter all off season. We know he can be a lockdown defender. I want to tell us, if you haven't watched Dom Harris, tell our viewers who Dom Harris is, what he brings to the table, and let's just set some realistic expectations for how he could realistically contribute for this Gonzaga team the rest of the way.
Yeah, Dom Harris he's a great guard. He's a top 60 recruit coming out of high school. Of course, last year was just on an absolutely loaded team where he didn't see the floor a whole lot. This year, like you said, was expected to be a huge part of the team. That injury came just weeks before the season started, which really threw a wrench into things. But this is a guy who's been consistently his whole basketball career over a 40% 3-point shooter. And Joel Ayai last year was the one that said he might have been the best individual defender on the team. And that was a team that had Jalen Suggs and Joel Ayai on there, who were both great defenders. And so for him to get that kind of praise, it just shows you what he's capable of doing. He played at Rancho Christian in high school, which was a top-ranked school. And on that team, he ran the show. This is a guy who has an above-average ball handle. He can facilitate. But when you add in the fact he can provide you with some knockdown shooting and lockdown defense, it's a guy that is a huge difference maker for a team. Now, that being said, becoming available this late in the season,
it's tough.
You don't really know what you're going to expect, because a lot of that is, game shape is different than being healthy. You can be healthy and you cannot be in game shape. Those are completely different items.
When we've seen footage that he's been in scrimmages, it's still very different than going down to Vegas and playing in the WCC tournament.
Yep. Things change on that end. So it'll be interesting to see, how many minutes does he carve minutes out. And I think a lot of that depends on Few. We fell for it start of the season. We were like, Few has to run an 8-man rotation this year. There's too much talent. You have to run 8-man rotation. Play St. Mary's, you see him run basically a 6-man rotation. So, we have fallen for it. We know better. So a lot of what happens with him this season, I think, will depend on Few and just what he's willing to give as far as a leash and willing to find out. But regardless, even him being back in practice makes this team better. This is a great player. His opponents, his starters go against. It makes everybody on this team better.
I think that what you can expect to see is, Rasir Bolton's come in and just been fire for this team. He was really that guy versus St. Mary's that decided he wanted to step up and has been great from behind the arc, has been a plus defender. I think that Dom brings kind of that Rasir Bolton skill set coming off of the bench. I think we both said off air that Don't look for Dom to get a lot of minutes unless someone gets in foul trouble. So if we see a lot of Dom, it may be in a scenario that the Zags aren't where they want to be. And so I think we have to set realistic expectations for not just what he's going to be capable of coming off of this injury, but going back to like what you said, where when the games get tighter, the bench gets a lot smaller in Mark Few's world. And we've seen this for 20 years. And so let's not, like you said, get too tricked that all of a sudden we're going to run a 7, 8, 9-man rotation. I mean, Hickman and Salas got 5 minutes apiece versus St. Mary's. Our bench did not score in that game.
And Hickman's an all WCC freshman and got 5 minutes. So, it just shows you.
You can't have your guard playing 40 minutes in, the national championship game and expect him to not turn the ball over and to shoot plus from 3-point. So that's a conversation for another day that I could go down an entire rabbit hole. Looking forward, the Zags, WCC tournament has kicked off down in Vegas. First round games have already gotten going. The Zags are scheduled to play Monday night. If things go to plan, we would get a rematch versus San Francisco. And then it's we saw Gonzaga get the better, of St. Mary's up here in Spokane. We saw St. Mary's storm the court down in Moraga last Saturday. I think everyone's hoping for the trilogy down in Vegas on Tuesday night. So if the Zags do win on Monday night in the semifinal, they would play, assuming it would be St. Mary's. They still need to win their semifinal as well, which could be against a much, improved Santa Clara team.
Sure.
And so not that they can't fall as well, but I think everybody's rooting for that third game versus Gonzaga and St. Mary's. I think we're going to be in for a dog fight. I think each game was about a 15-point game. If these teams meet a third time, I think it's going to go down to the wire. I think, like you said, the number one overall seed's going to be on the line for St. Mary's. I mean, it could be the difference between a 6 seed and a 4 seed. It's a huge, huge deal. And so
a lot on the line.
I know I'm looking forward to it. It's a weird week where, some of the conference tournaments have kicked off around the country. Gonzaga's tournament will be a little earlier than what we see from some of the bigger conferences. And they go a week now. They've got a week to figure some things out. I'm sure they're going to tune into the show, see what Drew and Steve have to say about how to fix things.
Absolutely.
And, I'm sure it'll get implemented into the game plan. But let us know, as always, down in the comments, what are your thoughts? Has this Gonzaga team been exposed? Are you worried? I'm a Denver Broncos fan, and I've mentioned to you many times off air that this team reminds me a little bit of the 2015 Denver Broncos, a unbelievable force on offense, but are they willing to step in and get punched in the mouth like we saw them, the Broncos versus the Seahawks in Super Bowl 48? We'll find out. We've got some time. I know that these kids have it in them to make a deep run. Only time will tell. March is here. I could not be more excited. We are less than 2 weeks from having NCAA tournament basketball, and it's getting closer. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let us know down in the comments what you're worried about, what you think this Gonzaga team will do down in Vegas, and we will see you very soon.